Hello everyone, I've done it again. I've managed to buy another huge box of retro PC computer parts online, and we're going to open it right now. People are either selling off parts of their collection that they don't need anymore, or they're intercepting stuff at the recyclers. I mean, this is an AGP video card. There's going to be lots of network cards for sure, and probably some television cards as well. But every now and again, there's another AGP video card. There's even ISA cards in here, which are pretty rare these days, so that's really cool. So I'm going to go through this and sort into piles so we can see what we actually have. Everything's sorted into 10 piles here, and there's everything from a PCIe video card, which is hardly retro, all the way down to ISA cards. There's plenty of serial and parallel port cards, and hard drive controller cards, of course. And as I thought, there's a bunch of network cards and a few television cards. There's even some USB port cards. But there's also PCI sound cards. There's a heap of AGP video cards, which will be cool to look at. And then there's a couple of PCI video cards. Now this SOS one I don't actually have in my collection, so that's an interesting one. And then there's these, which for all the world look like 8-bit ISA sound cards. Now you can't buy those, so I'm really curious to check those out. That'd be a real score. I've relegated those TV and network cards to the kitchen drawer, along with all the others where they belong. And now we can get back to the cards that are actually interesting. The two PCI sound cards are more interesting than they looked. I've not seen either of these before. This is a Tech Solo 5.1 with 6-channel sound. And this one here is an Advanced Logic ALS 4000. Now, I don't have either of those in my collection already, so I think we have to try these out. We'll start with the ALS 4000 sound card. I've put it into my Pentium 233 machine. It's so small you can't even see it. It's sitting underneath the Sanglabs ET6000 video card and the Voodoo 3D Effects card. This ALS 4000 card should be quite good. It has Sound Blaster, Sound Blaster Pro and Sound Blaster 16 emulation. And it should be great for DOS as well because it has DOS support. When I first ran this installation utility, it was hanging whenever I ran the test. But after I cleaned the contacts on the sound card, it sprang to life. So we now have 8 and 16-bit sound. Let's try out the FM music as well. Sounds pretty good. So let's install some demos from way back in the day that use Sound Blaster and Sound Blaster 16 and see what it sounds like. I found this demo from 1992 called Beginning of the End by TRB, and it claims to support Sound Blaster Pro, so let's give that a try and we'll see whether it actually works. Sounds pretty good. Certainly sounds like it's working to me. By the way, it has a pretty cool plot calls demo at the start here. That seems to work pretty well, but let's try a demo from somebody who is actually aiming at the sound card. So I picked T-Demo 0 by Renaissance, also from 1992. That sounds pretty good, don't you reckon? There's a few whistles and so on that come through the sound, but it's not too bad. I'm pretty happy with this sound card. I would certainly use this in a DOS machine. Well, I'd say the ALS 4000 was a success, but it's time to look at the Tech Solo card. The only problem is I'm having trouble identifying exactly which Tech Solo card this is. There's no real markings on it to say what it is, and unfortunately there's almost no information on these cards anywhere that I can find. Well, after a significant number of click scam and malware infested websites, I finally managed to find a ZDNet site that claims to have the Tech Solo driver, well, some Tech Solo driver, and actually they claim this is for Windows 2000 and XP, But according to another website, this is actually the driver for Windows 95. Well, this is Windows 98. I guess the other website was closer. So let's see what it set itself up as. And yeah, it seems to have set itself up as a CMI 8738, which is a little bit odd. There's no mention of Tech Solo here or any surround sound or anything like that. And there's also no DOS drivers that I can find anywhere, so I don't think this is going to work in DOS. Yeah, no joy in DOS, no sound whatsoever, so I think this is a Windows-only sound card. Well, after some hours of trying, I finally found a game which seems to be installing on my Pentium 233 MMX, and isn't going to cost me money, and which supposedly supports the surround sound of the Tech Solo card. It's called Star Siege, and it's made by a Sierra Online company called Dynamics in 1999, so it's a good match for this machine. Let's see if it'll work. Well, the sound seems to be working in the intro here, but unfortunately when I turn down the main speakers, the sound goes away, which means that none of the other speakers are outputting anything at all. So I think we need to look for an option in-game for surround sound. And the only thing I'm seeing here is sound system, so there's only Oriole 3D. That's weird. I would have expected to see Dolby Surround or something like that, but let's give it a try and see what happens. Maybe that's it. And it's just dumped us at the desktop. That is frustrating. I found this little option in the system tray which allows me to set up 5.1 surround sound. So I'm going to select that and see if it makes any difference to the game. Well, same problem in the intro here, so let's go into the sound options again and see whether they've changed since last time. So this time we have, again, just Oriole 3D. That's really bizarre, so I think this is just going to do exactly the same thing again. And it does. Yeah, this has been the story of the last few hours, so I'm going to have to give up on this card. Unfortunately, it looks like this one is a dud. I don't know about you, but I'm keen to get back to the 8-bit parts, and we've got two 8-bit ISA cards that I haven't identified yet. We'll start with this one, which I think is going to be the easier of the two, but I'm still a little puzzled by these coils on here. This seems like a strange thing to have on a sound card, but it does look for all the world like we have a line in and a line out jack. Now I recognise the 7809 voltage regulator, but I had to look up this chip here. It's an LM7000, and apparently this is a frequency generator for electronic tuning. So perhaps that ties in with the coils somehow. And right next to it is what looks like a crystal oscillator. But instead of having a frequency on it, it has some numbers, M7, there's a space, possibly a decimal point, and then 20DE. Now, I'm pretty sure the DE will be Germany, but the rest of it's a mystery to me. Is that a 7.2 megahertz crystal? What would that be for? So this is a little bit bizarre. Now, on the other side, we have an FCC ID, and I think this is going to give us more clues. We can look that up, find out the manufacturer of this card, and then go searching for cards that look similar, and maybe someone's identified this somewhere. Googling the FCC ID has produced results. Apparently this is an FM tuner card, and there's not much other real information here. It just says that it was registered by Ames Lab Proprietary Limited in Singapore, and even under purpose it says original equipment. Don't you just love bureaucratic paperwork? Anyway, it's 1994, and this is basically all the information we need to know that this one belongs in the kitchen drawer. But I'm pretty sure that other 8-bit card isn't going to be so uninteresting. There's no cheat sheet for this card. There's not an FCC ID on it that we can look up. It does say 1992, so we get a little bit more information, but we're going to have to go by other clues. There's an LM386 chip, and that's an audio amplifier. There's also a volume control here, and a line-in jack and an output jack. And there's just a standard logic chip here. This is a connector for the PC speaker according to the PCB, and this is the main board speaker jumper, which I assume is meant to be jumper. And so that's really all the clues we get. And I think from that we can conclude that it is something to do with sound, but we have to look up some of these other chips to see exactly what this is. Well, I haven't got much further. This is a programmable logic device, and this is generic enough to not tell us anything. This one here is a general purpose operational amplifier, which is certainly something you'd expect to see on a sound card, but again, it's just an amplifier, nothing exciting. This one here, I couldn't find any information on SS702, so that's not giving us any clues, and this one doesn't have a number on it, so perhaps it's a kind of BIOS. That would be great if we could read that. That would surely give us some information. But what I'm going to do for now is put this in the machine and see if Windows 98 can identify what the card is. It says that it's an AdLib compatible. That starts to make more sense. But I didn't see a Yamaha chip on there. Maybe they're just using some generic clones of the Yamaha chips. And that totally makes sense now. On a genuine AdLib card, there's a Yamaha YM3812 sound chip. And that's probably what that big chip is on our card, or a clone of it. And we might also have a clone of this little chip, which is apparently a Yamaha linear amplifier chip. That's our LM386, by the way. And the rest of it is just glue logic, so it doesn't really need to match at all. So I think we do have an AdLib clone, and now we just have to see if it works. Well, one game that supports the AdLib is A10, so let's look in the sound options here. And yeah, there's an AdLib music synthesizer option. So let's select that, and we'll run the game and see if it works. Well, I'm getting a kind of weird buzzing coming through, probably from noise on the bus. I don't think that's actual music. So it looks to me like the card isn't working at the moment. It looks like this is going to be a repair, so let's start with the basics. I went over all of the socketed ICs and reseated them to make sure they're making good contact. And then I went over the back of the board to check for dry solder joints. And there's one there that I might touch with an iron, but I think they're all pretty good. Now, interestingly enough, this volume control here seems to work. That noise on the bus goes up and down in volume when I turn that, so presumably our LM386 is actually working. Now, those chips here are just generic, so we can replace those if they're faulty. But this one here is going to be a pain. Being a programmable logic device, this is just custom, and so we are not going to be able to do anything if that's dead. But these ones I might be able to replace by Yamaha parts. Anyway, there's a lot we can try, but the first thing I'm going to do is replace all of these electrolytic capacitors. It's in the era where these could definitely have dried out, and that could explain the problems we're having. So let's try changing all of those out. Well, unfortunately, changing the caps out hasn't made any difference at all, so the only other thing I can actually do this week is replace one of the logic chips. I managed to find a donor board for that, but I'm going to have to order parts, I think, for the rest of it. Well, there's no change in the behavior of this thing, so the logic chip wasn't the solution. So that means I'm going to have to order some parts, which I will certainly do this week. And we'll take another look at this card as soon as I'm able to get something to try. But unfortunately, there's not anything more I can do with it this week. I've checked that there are no hot chips. I've also looked for any broken traces on the board. I'm pretty sure that it's just going to be one of those chips has failed, probably the main sound chip. Anyway, that's all I really have time for this week, and I hope that you enjoyed this. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in a later video. Bye!